Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. Although I released a statement yesterday, I wanted to speak with you in person today regarding the charges that have been filed against Father David Poulson. I announced on February 13th that I had received credible allegations against Father Poulson regarding the sexual abuse of minors. Following our policy for the protection of children, I immediately turned the matter over to law enforcement and have cooperated with the State Attorney General throughout the process that led to yesterday's arrest. I want to state unequivocally that I was not aware of any concerns regarding Father Poulson until I received those allegations in January of this year. In addition, it was not until I received and acted upon the allegations earlier this year that I learned of the memo that had been written in 2010. Let me give you a brief overview of what I knew and when. I came to the Diocese of Erie in late 2012. Among many initial responsibilities and priorities, I asked to be updated on clergy abuse cases. Father Poulson's name was not mentioned. Early in my tenure, I contacted District Attorney Jack Denieri to review our clergy files so that I could be assured there were no cases that needed to be revisited. As you know, this process was interrupted when the grand jury investigation began in September of 2016. Finally, when the grand jury was convened, I decided, in addition to responding to the subpoena, I would ask K&L Gates Law Firm to do a thorough review of all our files and procedures. They were still in the process of reviewing all of our files from the last 70 years when I received the allegation regarding Father Poulson this past January. I asked them to focus on him. It was at that time that they brought the memo to my attention. The Diocese of Erie has put a great deal of time and effort into making sure that every possible action is taken to ensure the safety of children and vulnerable adults. I do not make this statement lightly. I do not take this responsibility lightly. Thank you. I would be open to questions, or if you wanted to do individual, it's up to however you want to work.
Can we just ask a few now?
Okay.
Probably have the same. So,
Sure.
Bishop, could you just go over the timeline once again for the memo? I mean, the memo was produced to the grand jury by subpoena
Yes.
in 16.
Correct.
That's what the AG's office said.
Yes.
When did you know that memo existed?
Okay, I knew when the memo existed when this allegation against Poulson came forward in January of
this year.
2000. Correct,
Of this year.
2018.
Right.
Because if you recall, the grand jury had all of our files. The law firm has copies. So I asked them to go through their files and see what they had on David Poulson. Then they gave me a written report, and that was in there.
That was in there, but you weren't aware of that memo before basically
No.
January, and that's because you asked them to review Poulson's file in light of the complaint.
In light of the complaint, because I wanted to see if there were any more complaints.
And then you said that in the statement yesterday that when you were investigating Poulson at that point, you let the Attorney General's office know what you were doing.
Oh,
in terms of-
absolutely. What I did was, I think we got the complaint, well, the information, January 26th. I immediately called the district attorney in Crawford County, because that's where he resided. I let our law firm know, and then they contacted the Attorney General's office. And in my conversation with the district attorney in Crawford County, I said to him that this is what we know all of our information as it was laid out in the complaint. However, I will not act unless you, law enforcement, tells me to. I will step down, and then you tell me when I call Father Poulson in to remove him. And that's how we worked it. Because I was basically following the lead of law enforcement. And then I got the okay in February. That's when I issued the statement on February, I think it was February 13th.
13th, right. Okay. So you didn't have the file, the files that the memo was in,
It was in the file room.
but you didn't have, would you have had access to that independently, or would you not have known where to look?
Before
Right,
they took them?
right.
Yeah, if I had a reason to go look at them.
Okay,
Because we have 4 file cabinets. And when I came here, I didn't go through every file in the file cabinet. That was my hope what the district attorney's office would do for us. So that if they would see anything, they could flag it and, we could look at it. That's one of the reasons why I asked District Attorney Denieri to do that. So,
Bishop, what is the transition period like for something like this? Did Bishop Trautman ever alert you to any potential wrongdoing involving Father Poulson? Anything that you should have looked into, I guess, during that transition period?
no, he informed me of other actors that were serious cases. And, well, some of them are on the list. So I was aware of them. But most of them had been removed from ministry.
Any still active?
Who?
Any of the other actors
No.
that you were aware of?
Oh, no, the clergy who are on the list were the primary offenders, and all of them are out of ministry.
Bishop, if you had known about that memo when you were
When I
named
first came,
in October of 2012, if you had seen that memo then, I know it's hindsight, but what would you have done based on the contents of that memo?
well, it was an interesting memo because there was the victim, alleged victim, who told his girlfriend, who told a neighbor, who told the vicar, and the vicar told Bishop Trautman. And Bishop Trautman tried to contact the alleged victim with no success. I probably would have just turned it over to law enforcement, say, we have this, you figure it out. You have the resources that I don't have.
Because there were some admissions in that memo based on what the Attorney General's office said, in terms of, him acknowledging, at least hugging a boy and becoming sexually aroused at one point, so.
Yeah, well, that's why I would have turned it over to law enforcement, because let them figure it out. I don't have the resources to conduct that kind of investigation.
But there was information in that memo that would have prompted you, concerned you enough to contact
For
law
me,
enforcement.
I have to only speak for myself.
Right.
If I had that, yeah.
Bishop, you mentioned that you waited for clearance or the go-ahead from law enforcement before you brought Father Poulson into the office. If you could explain why you felt the need to wait, would it interfere with the investigation?
I didn't want to jeopardize the investigation for law enforcement, because my thought was, if I would call him in right afterwards, and law enforcement agreed, there was the possibility that he could have destroyed evidence. Because there was, they were able to do forensic, gathering of forensic information from the cell phones, the computers, and the laptop. So I didn't want to alert him that might be, be a possibility. So that's why I said to the district attorney I would follow his lead. Yeah,
I
I'm
must
sorry.
ask, I spoke with some people yesterday that were really shaken, including Catholics, and especially with the accusations that the church withheld certain information or hid it away, that memo specifically. What would you say to members of the faith that are questioning their faith at this moment?
Well, that's understandable. You know, I understand they're hurting. You know, they feel betrayed. And there's no way to make it right. But I think what we have learned here is it's better to act than to second guess. So I would hope that the faithful put their faith in God and not have their faith depend upon people.
Bishop, are you aware of the diocese influencing victims in any way, perhaps trying to, in lack of a better term, pay them off to keep them quiet about any sort of wrongdoing?
Not that I'm aware of. And no, I'm not aware of that.
And I guess to follow that up, I mean, we talked to State Representative Pat Harkins last night. I know there's some movement in Harrisburg. It's legislation trying to essentially eliminate the statute of limitations in cases like this. What is the diocese stance on that type of legislation?
Well, we don't have any control over the legislators. They'll do what they want to do. And all I'm asking for is a level playing field. That this is not just a church issue, child abuse. Even as the Attorney General said, you know, his concern, as all of our concern should be, is for the protection of all children. And so I think, you know, that a level playing field should be part of it.
Bishop, have you spoken to Bishop Troutman about this?
After all of this came out, yes, I did,
Okay.
yeah.
And you said yesterday that he's not making a statement at this point as far as.
Well, I'm not quite sure what he's gonna do.
Okay,
So, you know, I can't speak for Bishop Troutman.
okay.
I got enough to speak for myself.
All set?
Mhm.
Any other, okay. Well, thank you for your time. I hope this kind of gives you some idea of where we're coming from.